Hi everyone, and welcome back to Coachy TV. This is the second of a two-part series on aerobic threshold runs or easy pace workouts. But remember, just because something is easy doesn't necessarily mean that it's simple. In this video, we're going to take a look at how we can create some specific workouts for you and your athletes in the aerobic threshold training zone. If you missed the first part of this series, go ahead and click on the link in the description below. It'll talk to you a lot more about the science of aerobic threshold, why it is where it is in an athlete's energy continuum, and different things that we're not going to talk about in this video. I am Kyle Giacono. I am the head boys cross country and track coach at Wharton High School in Tampa, Florida, and I have been for the last 6 years. If you want to look at my credentials, they're on the screen. So we talked about this in the first video, and I'm going to just very briefly talk about the designed adaptations of aerobic threshold running. Our three main points. Cardiovascular system is going to be improved, their muscular system is going to be improved, and the metabolic system is going to be improved. But the key to all of those improvements is doing this type of workout for 20 continuous minutes. Your body releases a protein-like hormone that creates these changes in your body. And the real key is after 20 minutes is when your body starts to release it. So keep that in mind. The 20-minute window, the first part is just getting into the zone, and anything after that is we're really getting the improvements. The volume on these days is the intensity, and keep that in mind that it does not need to be faster just to be better. So some aerobic threshold workout types. For a distance runner, your longer distance type runner, these are some things that you want to keep in mind when you're creating some workouts, is you want to make sure you have a long run, each microcycle. This is the most important workout of the week. Always, no matter what part of the training year, you want to make sure you have a long run in your microcycle, however you're spacing that out. And this long run needs to be 20 to 22% of your weekly volume or your weekly miles. So if you have a kid that is going 50 miles in a week, their long run needs to be 10 miles, maybe a little bit longer. But if you're only going, say, 6, 7, or 8 miles on a long run and you're going 50 miles in a week, that's just a long recovery run, which is something that we're going to talk about here in a second. So make sure that it's in that area to really get the benefit out of this run, which again is the most important workout of your week or your microcycle. Make sure that they're keeping on themselves, that they're in the right training zone. You can undo this workout by going too fast. Make sure they're in the right paces that you set up with your VO2 max testing. And make sure if you want to have them check their heart rate, we're looking for 20 to 25 beats in a 10-second window in order to make sure they're in aerobic threshold training. Any breaks need to be quick. 30 seconds is what I tell my kids. You might be able to get out to 60 seconds, but if you have their heart rate drop below that 120 window per minute, they're going to get out of the zone, and you might undo that 20-minute window that we've been talking about previously, and you might need to run them for another 20 minutes just to get back in this training zone. So quick drink, and send them back on their way. You do not want their heart rate to drop out of their training zone on this. You don't want it to be above aerobic threshold. You want it to be in between, and you don't want it to drop below it either because of a break. You're also going to want to have some recovery runs each training window. Probably 2, maybe 3 is what I typically have in a week or a microcycle. 30 to 60 minutes is a good way to look at it. The first couple weeks, obviously, your recovery runs are going to be a little bit shorter, but anything 30 to 60 minutes is really more thought of as a recovery run, especially for this type of kid. You may not need a break. Typically, I would say our recovery runs are almost always about 45, maybe 50 minutes, maybe about 6.5 miles, something like that. And for a distance kid, you typically are not going to need to have a break. If you're only going 6.5 miles, even in hot Tampa, Florida, where we are, we can usually get by. But if they do need a break, make sure that it's, again, very, very quick, 30 to 60 seconds. Make sure that their heart rate does not drop out of their training zone. Something else that you can do, and I like to do this early in the season, is have recovery run with some pickups. This isn't like a fartlek, but it's sort of similar to that. But you're going to have probably bigger gaps in between them. It's a good transition to faster aerobic type workouts and add some variety early on. So you would maybe do this the same way as a recovery run. You say, guys, we're going to go out for 45 minutes, but for maybe times 4, times 6, times 8 periods, and you pick the period of time, we're going to do a pickup. I like to keep it at 60 seconds for my kids, only because I know that at 60 seconds they're not going to really get out of the training zone very much. It's really just going to give them a little bit more of a pickup. And let's say for 60 seconds you've got 6 of them in 45 minutes. We're only dealing with 6 minutes, so you're not really burning a bunch of glycogen, only at 6 minutes. Remember, you've got about 2 hours worth of that stored glucose, so you can get away with this, especially early on when you're not doing a lot of really fast or specific workouts. Again, breaks may not be needed, but if you do them, make sure that they are short. But what about your shorter middle distance kid, your 400-meter kid that you're just trying to transition up into a longer distance workout? Maybe you're trying to get them to run cross country or something for the first time. How can I get them to do this type of work? You're still going to want a long run every microcycle, but it needs to be probably shorter, and it may vary based on your experience with the kid. Is this a kid just moving up? Or is this a kid that has been transitioned maybe for a year or two and you're just trying to continue to add some volume for them? A place that I like to aim for with a kid like this is maybe like 45 minutes. You tell them an hour and they're going to say, no, we're not doing that. But 45 minutes, you can pretty much get most kids to get to that point at aerobic threshold after some time. Maybe not the first year. If it's a 400-meter kid moving up, you might need to start with 30 minutes. But this is a good place to get a kid to if you're going to work with them maybe for a couple years. Any break should still be about 30 seconds. Something you can also try with these kids is doing a track-based recovery run. These kids tend to like going to the track more than your pure distance kids who tend to not like the track, and you might get more volume out of them and more buy-in out of them if you do it this way. So you're still going to want to do this maybe 1 or 2 times per microcycle. It's going to be shorter than your pure distance kid. Remember, this is not just any mid-distance kid. This is a short mid-distance kid. Maybe 20 to 35 minutes broken up into track intervals. So maybe you tell the kid, we're going to run for 10 minutes. And we're going to have a 30-second break, and then we're going to do another 10 minutes to start them off at this point. Or, since you're pretty much going to be dealing with maybe sprinters moving up in this type of group, maybe you could tell them, and you might get more buy-in this way, is we're going to do, maybe 6 times 400 with at 1 minute and 45 seconds. We're just not going to stop in the middle. We're going to do 400s at that point, and you're going to do the next one and the next one, and they're going to say, wow, 145, that's really easy. I can do that. And you might get more buy-in them out of that. Give them a 30-second break after your 4 or 5 or 6 or however you want to do it. And during that break interval, which again should be very short, 30 seconds, have them check to make sure they're in the aerobic threshold training zone. Remember, we're looking for 20 to 25 beats in a 10-second window if checked by the carotid artery. Just make sure that they're in the right training zone. Especially these kids may have a tendency to get out of aerobic threshold a lot easier than a distance kid. Some takeaways for all these types of workouts. Sometimes distance kids like to warm up even on distance days, and there's really no warm-up run that needs to be done on this type of day. I would still recommend maybe doing some mechanical type things, maybe some hip posture, mechanical type of warm-ups, but a recovery pace run to warm up for a recovery pace aerobic threshold type workout really doesn't make sense, and it really is not going to benefit them. Say if you're going on a 9-mile long run and you're going to start it off with a 1-mile warm-up and then some stretches, well, you've really just kind of wasted that first mile. Your warm-up is probably going to be at about aerobic threshold type pace anyway, so it's better to kind of string those things together. We talked about 20 minutes. Anything above that is going to actually benefit your kid in aerobic threshold type workouts. So it'd be better to kind of string those workouts that time all together. If you think about your training microcycle, if you're looking at a week-long microcycle, if you've got a long run and 2 to 3 recovery runs, and you're starting all of them with a 1-mile warm-up followed by drills that's getting them out of that training zone, you're really wasting 4 miles that whole week. That's really not benefiting them. You might need to get them out of the mental side of I've always done this, but there's really no physiological reason why you would want to have a warm-up run on this type of day. But on this type of day, you do want to have a really good stretch afterwards, a static stretch, to bring their body temperature down safely and a little bit slower, bringing their body temperature down. It's also going to make sure that any maybe little traumas in there are getting stretched out and recovered for the next day. This is also a good day that you could do some core work afterwards, maybe some abdominal work, some backs and hip type exercises to make sure their whole trunk is good and strong. Whenever you talk about long type runs like this, you always get the question about, coach, should I double run, especially from your older kids? And there's no science that says you should do that until you get to about 65 to 70 miles a week. And most high school kids are not going to do that. You might have some that are super, super high volume, but unless you do, let's say you have a kid that wants to break up a 12-mile run into 2 6-mile runs, one in the morning and one at night. Well, on that second 6-mile run, the first 20 minutes are almost wasted because you got to get back into aerobic threshold training before your body starts to release that protein-like hormone that we've mentioned. So it's better to string those things all together. Unless you have a kid that's really just high volume, it's really better to not double run. And also, you're going to have less recovery time in between. If you do one long run followed by a 24-hour recovery, that's way more recovery than 2 separate 12-hour recovery windows. And that'll kind of help them better long term if you have a kid that asks you about double running. Some good look-fors and danger points you want to keep in mind. Heat is going to change everything on these days. Here in Tampa, Florida, we have to always keep an eye on this. We're in a stretch of period right now. We're not going to have a 60-degree temperature for probably 4 months. So you want to make sure that heat is not affecting their heart rate. It's why I give them the whole 65 to 70% window. They can go slower on the 65% of their VO2 max in order to bring it down if it's just super, super hot. Also, to try and combat this, I always try and make my long run on the coolest day of the week, depending on where that sort of falls. So if I know I want to have a long run between like maybe Monday and Wednesday of a week, just figure out what's going to be the coolest day, take a look at the weather, if it's going to be raining. As long as there's no thunder, raining on a long run is a good thing. It's going to cool them off some, and you're not really worried about super fast pace, so it's really not a big deal. Recovery runs are not going to be as affected by heat just because obviously it's not nearly as long, so fit these in as needed. Make sure they're keeping track of their pace as well as their heart rate. Remember, 20 to 25 beats in a 10-second window lets you know you're in the aerobic threshold training zone. Do not group your kids socially. Don't let them run with their best friend. Split the groups where it makes sense based on their date, pace, VVO2 max. And never, ever, ever let your kids all run together. Group runs and those types of things basically guarantee that most of your kids are not in aerobic threshold or the right training zone. Even if you're not doing aerobic threshold running that day, if you group everybody together, most of your kids are not in the right zone. Your top kids are probably not going to be doing nearly enough work to get any benefit. They're probably going to be below the heart rate zone that they need to be in. And your lower kids are just going to be working way too hard on a day that's supposed to be an easy pace run, and they're going to pay for it long term. They're not going to be able to do a faster pace workout, and your top kids are not going to get the adaptations that you're looking for from this run. So do not group everyone together. And avoid having them kick in at the end. A lot of times, especially with the boys I deal with, they want to try and kick in. They want to try and impress people maybe that are in the parking lot. Don't let them do this. It can just take them out of the training zone you're looking for, especially if they're doing it for a half mile or 1,200 meters or something. They're going to be getting too far out of the training zone that you're looking for. Just cue them to run with good posture and mechanics, especially on the second half of these types of runs. You're stretching them out to the longest part of their aerobic capacity, and you want them to run strong is really the cue that I give them. Good mechanics, arm swings, just run strong, especially on the second half of these runs. Some key points to take away. Aerobic threshold workouts are the foundation of any endurance runner. It's going to improve them cardiovascularly, muscular systems, and their metabolic improvements are going to be the key points here. And these are going to be the bulk of their weekly miles. One long run of 20 to 22% of the weekly miles with 2 to 3 recovery runs of 30 to 60 minutes for your distance kids. This is where most of their miles are going to come from. I'll do a whole series of videos on maybe where some of the percentage of your weekly miles should be coming from, different training zones in the coming weeks here based on Jack Daniels' system. But just know that this is where the bulk of your weekly miles should be coming from, so you want to make sure that you're in the right training intensity. And that training intensity is 65 to 70% of their date pace VVO2 max. Again, if you missed the first part of this series, click on the link in the description below, and they'll take you through the science of why that is the case and why the heart rate is 120 to 150 beats per minute. Our example of a 10:30 kid from the first video has an aerobic threshold pace of 8:05 to 7:30. Do not group this kid socially with a kid whose date pace VO2 max is much slower or a kid that's much faster. Make it based on their date pace. Intensity is the volume. Do not think that you have to go faster to get them better. The intensity, the training adaptation is coming from the volume. Low intensity will spare their glycogen, their stored glucose for faster days. And this is really the big key point is it needs to be 20 continuous minutes in order for your body to make these adaptations, the cardiovascular, muscular, and metabolic improvements that we're looking for here. Anything less than 20 continuous minutes, once they're in shape, early on you may have some groups that you're really just trying to stretch out, but once they're in shape, once you're a couple weeks into the season, anything less than 20 minutes and they're not, you're better off giving them a day off. They're not going to be improving at all in terms of their cardiovascular, muscular, and metabolic system. So just keep that in mind. Breaks should be short so they don't get out of this training zone. 20 continuous minutes. Make sure they're in the right training intensity, and they're going to get the benefit out of this type of workout. If you like this video, think about maybe liking or subscribing to the channel. If you have a question, go ahead and leave it in the comments down below. Next video series I'm going to work on is some lactic threshold or tempo pace type workouts. Those will be coming out in the next day or two. Until then, this has been Coach ETV.